Hi, everyone.
Hello. Sorry, I'm spacing out here. I'm trying to make sure
Yeah.
my other window is closed on my computer so we don't get weird crossover noise.
Yeah, I had to like mute things and turn other things on, and then I had to try not to like watch various screens so that I don't see like there's always a little bit of a delay versus like when you're like live in the moment doing it, and then like having like YouTube going. So it's like a little bit like trippy.
Yeah. I'm excited though to chat about this book because it's like one of the first books I've reread in a really long time, and I never reread things. So
Yay! I'm glad I got you to reread it.
Yeah,
And this is one of the. Wait, Kate, are you done? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I finished it like an hour ago, so right down to the deadline, but I made it.
Nice. This is a very unflattering angle for me, but we're just gonna stick with it. Well, head off or like under the chin. I'll lounge.
there you go. The plant in the background makes it look very official. I think it's actually nicer than my background, which is all my notebooks and stuff.
Yeah, mine's just
no, yours looks library. Well, I actually have not finished it, and really embarrassingly, I got so like caught up in scheduling stuff like the last couple of weeks. So I got really behind when I was home on vacation, and just So then I was like rapidly trying to finish it today, and my puppy was not always super on board with that. But I have like 20 pages left, and I've read it like a million times. Actually, even when I was home, my sister, one of my sisters is also like pretty into Guy Gavriel Kay, and she saw me reading it and was like, how many times is this that you are reading like this specific one? I was like, couldn't even tell you. Don't know. And then Kate, is this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I have to show my copy that I have of this because it is from the original printing. It's like from the 90s. I did not buy it when it first came out. I didn't read this for the first time until I was in high school. So that would have been, the early 2000s. But I picked this one up at the thrift store to have. I didn't actually read physically this time. I listened to an audiobook while I was doing puzzles. So this copy has only ever been read once, but yeah, I thought that was funny because it looks so different than like what the one that you used for the.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like the red one is even the newest one, and then I have this is like the redo Canadian ones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this was like when I was buying them originally. This was like the format all of them all. So like a lot of mine look like this kind of style. Although this is the only one that's like big. It's like a lovely
floppy
one. Oh, the other ones are all those like small trade paperbacks.
I hate reading hardcovers because like, and like with the slip cover thing, dust cover, you have to take it off and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of a book that I have just to sit on my shelves and not necessarily read, but that's okay. And I'm sad because it's not one of like, I have a signed copy of Last Light of the Sun, which has, because I got to meet Guy Gavriel Kay and get a signature from him, but I didn't own this book at that time. He's from my city. He does readings. Like when he releases books, he's always at like the little local independent bookstore. I've seen him do readings multiple times. Yeah, I'm not as big of a stan as you are, Kristen. We have so
cool.
many comments also. I don't know if you can see, Kristen.
I know, I just had to switch screens to check them. Yeah. Hi everyone. Hi Taylor. Hi Maria. Awesome. Yeah, actually when I lived in Toronto, there was the only like fan online stuff that I ever did was Guy Gavriel Kay's Bright Weavings, which is like an unofficial website that he sort of had going. And it was like the only thing that I did like that when I was young. And apparently on it always said like there's this bookstore in Toronto where if you leave a book of yours, he will sign next time he's there. It's like his favorite bookstore.
Oh, Kristen.
Oh,
you froze briefly.
Like my biggest regret, I feel like, from living. Yeah, I saw it happen. I was like, oh no. Hi, Esme. Okay, well, let's jump into, did I freeze again?
No, you're good.
You're good.
We can hear you. Can you
No,
not hear
okay.
us?
Let's jump in. We all know each other, but we'll do like intros. No, I can hear you, but I think it's a little bit delayed on my end.
Okay, intros. I'm just going to jump in. Hi, I'm Sarah from the channel Bright and Bookish. This was my second time reading A Song for Arbonne, as I've already mentioned. Also, I listened to it on audio this time, which I already mentioned. I am a Guy Gavriel Kay fan, but I haven't read as much of his stuff as Kristen has. Like, Kristen, I think, has probably read all of his stuff. But Last Light of the Sun is one of my top favorite books of all time, which is by Guy Gavriel Kay. And then earlier this year, I just read like 3 of his books back to back to back. So I'm kind of immersed in the world of Guy Gavriel Kay right now. So I'm really excited to talk about this one, especially in comparison to some of those other books.
I'm Kate. My channel's Kate Coy. This is my first reading of this book and first Guy Gavriel Kay book at all. So I am definitely excited to talk about it, and I'm excited to get to more of his stuff. So, yay.
Okay, oh, Jake's here. Hey, Jake. So I'm Kristen from the channel Kristen is Fully Booked, and I have read all of Guy Gavriel Kay's books, most of them multiple times, except for the new one. I have not read his newest release. It just came out in May yet. It's a whole thing. I was going to buy a copy in
You're frozen again, Kristen. You probably know this, but it's a very good position to be frozen in. You look very smart right now. This is the joy of live anything.
Right.
Okay, you're back, Kristen. You're back. So you got to tell us about Last Light of the Sun, or not Last Light of the Sun, the other one. The one you were just talking about.
All the Seas of the World. I haven't bought it yet. Anyway.
Yeah, I won't mention anything about it because I know you want to be spoiler free on that one, because that is one of the ones that I read earlier this year.
Yeah. Well, I know Jake like really loved it. He like raved about it. So I'm very excited to get it. I just like physically want to get a copy first. But Song for Arbonne is by far my favorite of his books, although I do love like the majority of them. And even I would say like The Last of the Sun is one of my least favorites. But even when I reread it last December, there were so many moments in it that I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Like this scene is so amazing. So it's like, it's not bad by any means. Like I still really, really, really like it. So I thought that, you know, I was up for a reread, and I thought I would ask everyone else to join me for it, especially because I do think it is like a decent Guy Gavriel Kay to test the waters with. Like I don't think it's the most representative of everything that he writes, but I think it's one that you can read and have like a pretty reasonably like odds are like good time with it, and it is reflective of like his overall like prose and everything like that. Just the story I think is a little bit like tighter than a lot of his other ones, and I don't know, he changes a lot with every book, and I think that like he experiments with a lot of things. So I feel like this is one of his really early books. I almost don't count Fiona Bar as like it's like a totally separate thing. It was like him doing Tolkien, and then like from Tigana on is like what I see as like his writing. And so this is early in regards to that. It was the second one after Tigana, and if I'm remembering correctly. And so I feel like I can see so many things like, oh, this is him working towards like exploring blank that comes in later books. And then I also see a lot of like parallels to Tigana as well, and like certain character types or like settings and scenes and things like that. I'm like, oh, that feels a lot like this other moment in Tigana. So I just love it. I know that it has some problems, but it's one of my favorite books ever. So let's talk, I guess, non-spoilers for a bit for those people who are joining, just for non-spoilers, and then we'll get into our spoilery chats in a bit. So overall, like thoughts Sarah, do
I'd
you
love
want
to
to start
hear.
that?
No, I want Kate to go first
Kate
because
to go?
I've read it before, so I would like to hear from the first timer.
Okay. Well, this kind of surprised me. I will definitely say that. Like, I didn't think I would hate it, but I'm not usually a huge political intrigue person, and I'm not even a very big, even though I like a lot of history, I don't read a lot of historical fiction, and this kind of seemed like it would fit in the realm. And I was really surprised by how much I love this. This is 5 stars. It is absolutely going to be a favorite of the year. There's something about his prose style that just works really, really well for me. This might be a weird comparison, but it was kind of like Hobb, where I read like the first chapter and I knew like immediately I want to read everything.
Ooh, I mean, it's a great intro chapter.
It was so good.
Like,
I literally went out and bought all of his books after the prologue. So
yeah,
I loved it.
that's amazing.
It does have some spots that I didn't like as much, but I mean overall, I love the characters. I loved the immersion. It just blew me away. I absolutely loved it.
Yay! I actually feel like, I mean, first off, that makes me so happy. And if it's like the writing style is what you really gelled with, then I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Like, I feel like there's different storylines that are going to touch every different person that reads various Guy Gavriel Kay books. But like the overall, like, I don't know, he has some recurring themes, and just like the writing style is always like this beautiful and like very, like a little more formal and a little more old fashioned. And so I think it's a good one. It's an easy one to, I think it's easier to get through than like Tigana personally, and some other ones that have like some like weird stuff or some slower starts or like even more random characters. Like I've seen that complaint a lot with Tigana, where you're like, I don't know who the main character is, and I'm a third of the way in the book. So I feel like this is a good one to test out, like if you think you'll like his writing, because it's like a plot that you can actually like pretty quickly go through with, I think.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you loved it. Oh my God, that's so exciting. Do you have a sense of where you're going to go next?
I'm tempted to go Tigana, just because I am a fantasy reader, and that one always sounded intriguing. I actually already have it on audiobook, and I had it on ebook because I think Alan was doing a read along with that, and I just never ended up joining. So that'll probably be next.
Okay. That's a pretty good place. Like, I think each of the books have a spot where I'm like, oh, that's a weird scene, or like, you know, there's a weird sex scene. I think this is the least weird sex stuff in the majority of
I don't know what the other ones are, but this was not what I would call weird.
No, exactly. Like they're always like, that was not maybe necessary. But he doesn't like really romanticize it, which I actually kind of appreciate. But okay, yeah, I'm so happy that you liked it. Tigana is definitely like more magic. It's still like, it's not like a hard magic system, but there's some sorcerers. Okay, and Sarah,
Overall thoughts. I think because I read A Brightness Long Ago and Children of Earth and Sky and All the Seas of the World recently, which are the 3 most recent of Guy Gavriel Kay's works, that this one didn't hit as hard as the first time that I read it. And I think that, so I enjoyed it. It's a 4.5 star. I think the first time I read it, I gave it 4 stars. It's never been a 5-star book for me personally. I think that the plotting is so tight that it almost doesn't let Kay do the stuff that he's good at, which is kind of weird because
I totally get that.
In some of his other stuff that I've read, I love like the little characters that you're like, why do I care? But Guy Gavriel Kay makes you care, and that's the thing that you don't get in this.
What was that priest's name who keeps on getting caught eating fish?
Oh, I don't remember names ever.
Roche, I think, maybe?
Yeah, Roche, yeah. Like the Roches and the Loops of the story. I totally get that. Yeah, you're right. There's less of those snippet characters.
Yeah. And like I think also I think my favorite Guy Gavriel Kay book that I've read so far is A Brightness Long Ago. That was like a 6-star book for me. And
that beat out Last Light of the Sun for you?
I haven't reread Last Light of the Sun since like 2012. So it's been a really long time. I need to reread it. That'll probably be the next place that I go with Guy Gavriel Kay, is to reread The Last Light of the Sun, to see if I like. And I love that like Norse mythology kind of, like, there's not as much mythology, but just that like the Viking stuff, which is in Last Light of the Sun. So I might like that more. So we'll have to see. But I just thought that the characters were less good in A Song for Arbonne than in A Brightness Long Ago. And in A Brightness Long Ago, you have the same kind of like two men rivals against each other thing going on that you have in A Song for Arbonne. And I just thought that the conflict in A Brightness Long Ago was more interesting than the conflict in A Song for Arbonne. But I do think that this is a good place for people who aren't used to Guy Gavriel Kay to start with Guy Gavriel Kay, because this is it's more like what you would expect from a fantasy novel, even though there's no magic. Like the plotting and the political intrigue, like I feel like it is an entry point, but I don't think it represents what his writing is now. And like I haven't read Lions of Almasan.
Agreed. His writing has definitely evolved.
Yeah. So like if you read this and then you tried to pick up All the Seas of the World, like I think you'd be like, what the hell is this? So I think there's kind of
I was just gonna say, you can see like pieces of what he did here that are like he's taken that and it's like that's what he's focusing on now. Like particularly A Brightness Long Ago is like side characters, or it's like the people surrounding the players, like the big players, whereas this one, we're in the POV, like we're in the head of the big players. And Liso,
yeah.
Liso, thank you.
Liso, yeah.
You're my like French expert now. I'm gonna still say Arbonne because that's what I've always said. But like, anyway, Liso is like a prototype of that, right? Where she's like an observer, someone who is adjacent or surrounding or in the orbit of the movers and shakers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Which apparently bothered a lot of people, that she didn't have a little bit more of a.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Like,
yeah.
What's that like? She wasn't like a player. She didn't have her own distinct plot that played a role.
She's peripheral. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Though she actually, and I mean, this is just kind of spoilers. She does actually have a very important role thematically that I will bring up when we get into to the spoiler section, and we're out of non-spoilers, because I think there is something that she's very important for in the theme of the book that people might have missed because it's right at the end.
Ooh, I'm excited. Okay, for that insight. I haven't gotten to her last POV in my reread yet, so I'm gonna do that tonight and like.
It's like one line too, and we'll talk about it.
I'm excited to see what it is. I almost feel like I might go back and like annotate my Guy Gavriel Kay books, which like I don't annotate books. I don't put stuff in the books. The fact that this is like as kind of damaged as it is, and it's like it doesn't look that damaged, but it's like, it's peeling a little bit. It's like because I've read this 20 times. But I might. So for me, I don't know. I don't know which order this was in my exploration of Guy Gavriel Kay. Definitely like the Fionn of Our Tapestry was the thing that I read first. This might have been my first of what I would say is like his historical fantasy-esque, like quarter turn to the fantastical. I think this might have been my first one of all of those, which would maybe make sense why it's like such a nostalgic, important book for me. Like I did not go in order from when I caught up. Then I have gone in publication order, but I think Last Light of the Sun would have been like me catching up to publication. So all of the other ones I would have read intermixed, but I think probably this is like just like the most nostalgic book for me. I have a CD, like I don't physically have the CD, but I have an album that I listened to while reading it that I absolutely had to listen like to on repeat when reading this book this time around, because it's like so distinctly the right atmosphere for it for me. And that's because like I bought this book at the same time as I bought that CD, and I just consumed them both together. I do think that like it's a much tighter plot. You don't get those like more meandering, subtle, slow moments that you do in a lot of, like, in the majority of his other works. But for whatever reason, like, I always get really, really caught up with the singular moments, like in any Kay book, but in this one in particular. So I don't know if there's like a reason that I could specifically say that it's like, it's this about this book that I love so much more than other ones, because it's always moments for me with other ones, but it's probably more nostalgia. And I think just that, like, it's a little bit more like of an easy, like, I don't want to say palatable, but like, it's an easier read than some of the other ones where like they do have these like chunking sections that kind of where he philosophizes a little bit more. And I like that. And I like the way he does it, but sometimes it drags a little bit. Yeah. So, I mean, this read, I felt like the plot raced, like, whereas in other reads, I would have always said like, this is a slow, you know, quiet book. And on this one, it felt like bam, 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 we're like racing through the year. And they would be like, and I even read it slowly, like a section a week. Like, I wasn't racing through the book, but it felt like it was racing for me this time. I did cry in all of the same spots. I think there's still like a couple more crying moments to come for me tonight when I finish the last 20 pages. And like, yeah, like I always cry at the same spots. Yeah, he just gets me. There's so many comments. So I just want to get through those, and then we'll see if there's more non-spoilery stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay, so somebody was asking Taylor, Maria was asking Taylor what her favorite Guy Gavriel Kay book. And it's the Sarantine Mosaic, I think is what she's saying. Yes. Yeah, which is a duology. And I also agree with Taylor that Lines of Alderson is a great place to start. And I know when Jake Bishop did his Where to Start with Guy Gavriel Kay book, this was his #1 pick for that. So make sure to check out his video for that. I personally intend to also create a Where to Start with Guy Gavriel Kay video in the future. But you guys know that that's definitely coming. Yes, Maria, I would support this decision as well. Brightness Long Ago is really interesting because we read that for my book club a couple of years ago, like right when it came out, and my book club hated it. Like, hated it with a passion. There's a couple of different horse racing scenes, but like there's one really big horse race, and there's like a really important turn. Like this, like a really difficult turn in the track. And during the horse race, we get like several different POVs, and he switches perspective like a dozen times just going around that corner. And my book club just like roasted this book.
But that's the best thing about Guy Gavriel Kay. Because he switches seamlessly, and you're like, this over there.
Yes.
I love that about his writing. That is what is Guy Gavriel Kay to a T. And yes,
and they hate it. But it was interesting because like I feel like Taylor. You can tell me if I'm wrong, Taylor, if you're still here. But I feel like even Taylor didn't love it. But what I think was the difference in like, so this one he doesn't, in A Song for Arbonne, he doesn't character hop as much, and you see like there are those characters like the Luths and the Roches, and what are some other like random, the Robin, the Chancellor, Robin, unrequited love, like things like that, where like having those like random small little snippets just to like filter through is really, really a big thing that he does that I absolutely love. And I feel like he took the like side character thing to the extreme in A Brightness Long Ago, which you either liked it or you didn't.
It's worse in All the Seas of the World. There's a lot of side characters in All the Seas of the World.
Yeah.
There's one in particular that I think when you get to, I'll be interested to hear what you think, because
So I haven't gotten to the Luth wrap up yet, so you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think in this book he finishes any of those side characters or like peripheral characters' lives. Whereas in other books, he'll have a character that he'll introduce, and you like are told enough about this person's life that you like sort of care about them, but like quickly. and they like either witness something important or they see something or like deliver a message, but like they somehow enter the story and then leave it. And what he'll just like finish their whole life story for you. Like he'll just like, and then this happened in his life and blah blah
but in
blah.
like 6 pages,
and
like
yeah, it like this, like yeah, like this. It was a really, really perfect moment of this in The Last Light of the Sun, actually. And maybe I'll grab my copy later and like highlighted it specifically, where he like introduces this as an idea that's like, you know what? There are other people with their own stories going on, and sometimes their story intersects with yours, and they just like keep right on to their own story. And then he like summarizes this guy's life for you. And I think he even like does like he'll like tell you about the person's like, you know, their grandkids maybe do something important that's related to the story. And I love that he does that, but not everyone does. But he doesn't really do that in this one.
Yeah. I think Luth, though, if I'm remembering who Luth is, I do think Luth had an important role in this book. But maybe I'm getting mixed up who it was. But
yes, Luth has an extremely important role.
Yeah.
But it's just like a quiet thing. Yeah, I actually feel like I didn't appreciate A Brightness Long Ago as much until I watched a ton of reviews. And then I was like, oh, he's a genius.
I think he is. He is a genius.
Okay. Let
there
me
was
scan through some more
comment
comments.
here about like the description, the beautiful description of his writing, and I can't remember who it was. Oh yeah, there it is. And like this is staple GGK. The way he writes his beautiful descriptions, that is still the same in his newer stuff. Like I can't speak to his stuff before A Song for Arbonne, but it's definitely, his writing is so gorgeous. It is phenomenal. But it does feel kind of old-fashioned in some ways.
Yeah.
Not like
it definitely reminded me of like Tolkien in some ways. Like not as wordy, but kind of the same feel.
It's that narration style that he uses that allows him to do that, because a lot of more modern stuff is very up close narration, where we're like either in the head of a character, whereas here we're kind of like a half step back. So like in this book, in A Song for Arbonne, we're seeing what Blaise is doing and we're getting some of his thoughts. Like sometimes he's like, wow, these Arbonnais are really weird, and like that kind of thing, or like, oh, these stupid women. Like we get that kind of stuff, but because we're that sort of quarter step back or half a step back, we also get to see how other people interact with him instead of just how he interacts with other people, which I appreciate a lot more in my fantasy. It is a type of writing which I think allows you to do those descriptions. I think when you're like really tight in on things, it's just doesn't read as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing that he does, or with his writing, is that he like switches the tense even depending on the character or the moment, and you really, really feel, or no, you don't feel it. It's that it's so seamless and it makes so much sense. And then he'll have this like omniscient sort of step back where he'll like give you more information, but you still feel like it's not like deep character dives, like you're not like in it with the characters. But I don't, and that's what I want generally, but I wouldn't want that for this, because that's not what these books are like. That's not the feel of them. These are thematic, right? Like this is that's how I would describe this book. Like it's not character driven, it's not plot driven. I think these are theme driven books.
Yeah, for sure.
And I like that his writing is descriptive in a way that's immersive without ever getting, well, I shouldn't say ever. There are very few moments where I felt like it got like info dumpy. And that's the problem I tend to have with really descriptive writing, is sometimes it tends toward just like throwing info at you. And it feels like with his writing that he's more kind of inserting you in the world. And you get to kind of like, the way he's describing all these small things, like they have the hand warmers that like I could picture perfectly because he's telling me exactly what it looks and it feels like for the characters. So like it feels so much more immersive than most of the other ones I've seen.
Yeah, the whole thing that I know Kristen and I have talked about before, about how like I think that lazy world building is when you take a historical thing and then you just like change all the names. Well, that's what Guy Gavriel Kay does. Like Arbonne is Provence and Gorhout is the more northern part of France, which
Northern
I can't remember the name of. But like these are historical places. But because he is such a boss at his world building. It doesn't feel lazy the way that some other historical fantasy that I have read feels, where there just isn't as much put into it. And like, there's nothing fantastical about this book. There's two moons. There's two moons, and the chick who lives on the island can sometimes see premonitions. Like, that's the only magic in this whole book. And like, the fact that there's two moons doesn't even matter. Like, it's not salient to the plot whatsoever.
He just likes two moons. That's it.
All of his stuff. But the world building is so good that I love it and I eat it up. And I'm like, yes, like, this is not just 12th century France. Clearly, this is, his own world that he's put all this time and investment in. But I think that's also because he's just done the research. Like, you can tell. And like, I didn't do a deep dive, but I looked a little into like troubadours and the like heritage behind that, like in the 12th century in Provence, and some of the like courtly love stuff and chivalric love stories. And like, he has used all of that stuff to inform how he has written this book in a way that like most people probably would never notice. And like, unless you are the kind of person who's like a history nerd and wants to go look things up. And that's how I felt about like his other stuff. Like, the reason I loved A Brightness Long Ago so much is that I know a lot about Renaissance Italy, and that is the setting that we're in A Brightness Long Ago. Like, that horse race was a real thing. Like, like, he didn't make that up. He took something that's a real thing, and you can go and read about that real thing and learn about the real riders, and he's modeled people off of it. And like, even like the fact that, what is the queen's name in this? Signe? Is that her name?
Scene. Okay, you would say Scene in Denmark. It's a Danish name.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Scene.
I think in the audiobook they pronounce it like Signe or Signa or something like that. They pronounce the G. Yeah. But anyhow, she is like Eleanor of Aquitaine, except that doesn't make sense because Eleanor of Aquitaine was a northern French queen and not in the 12th century. So like, there's really interesting little things that are a little bit different about this that aren't as like true to the history. And like the Cathar thing, like the fact that the Arbonnais have a different religion than Gorhot, and that they are being persecuted by the priest from Gorhot because of their religious beliefs, and it's like this religious crusade that he wants, kind of thing. Like, that is loosely based on the Cathars, but not in a direct way. Whereas like in his newer stuff, you can like look, like the fall of Byzantium, is that what it's called at the time, when in like Sarantium is Byzantium, right? Am I right in that? Yeah. So like, those are like direct parallels, whereas in this,
Sarantium is Constantinople,
which I think it used to be called Byzantium before it was Constantinople.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, like, it was like the Byzantine.
Yeah.
Taylor, chime in.
Yeah. So, but like, I think that there were more direct parallels in his more recent stuff, or like even like just later than this. And this was a little bit more a mix up of things too, which I think also may have impacted how I felt about this one compared to like A Brightness Long Ago.
Yeah. And I mean, so Taylor says yes. Thanks, Taylor.
And Maria too. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. What was I gonna say? Okay, so A Song for Arbonne is a standalone, and it's not like in his created world that he does. So Tigana and A Song for Arbonne are like totally separate. They're just like him trying out this thing where he takes a time period and he plays with it a little bit. Like Tigana is Italy, I think Renaissance Italy as well, but there's like a world of difference between Tigana and what he's doing in A Brightness Long Ago with Renaissance Italy as well. But eventually, so actually right after Song for Arbonne is Lines of Alverson in terms of publication order. And that's when he sort of creates like basically our world, but with two moons. And everything has different names, and the religions have slightly different names, and it's a lot more, I think, closer to actual historical events and things like, and like geography and stuff. So you do see that quite a bit more, whereas this one is like, I think this is like, he's like starting to play with his ideas, and that's why you can like see the progression of his writing and how he changes that as you like read through. Not necessarily that you should read through in publication order by any means. Non-spoilery thoughts about like different characters, favorite characters.
I mean,
who we
like
were rooting for Blaze to wind up with.
I honestly, that's one of my pet peeves, is that so many women are just in love with Blaze, and I don't get it. He gets
I
all
don't
the
think
ladies.
they're all in love with him.
No, and I do get it. It's
I think
thematic.
Blaze.
He's the knight errant, and that's the whole like chivalric, like, and it's part of how he's deconstructing those kinds of stories about the knight and the women, and how he's looking at women's roles in medieval Europe. And so it does make sense, but it does bother me still that I'm like, seriously, Liso, why do you care about Blaze? Like, he's not that great, Liso. You can have any other guy. That made me mad. Oop, I bumped my camera.
She also like doesn't really know him. They talk like twice.
Well, Ariane doesn't
3
know
times.
him either.
Yeah,
Like,
no, agree. Agree. Or like, I think someone I saw in the Discord was like, Rosala's in love with him, and Luciana's
right.
in love with him, and whatever. And I'm like, not quite. Like, no one's in love with him. Everyone wants to sleep with Blaze. That's
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
But even Rosala,
Liso's in love with him in like a weird.
I think Liso
kind of
is like, I think he plays like a little bit of like a muse, angsty. I think she's in love with him like in like an arty way. Yeah. And like Rosala, she's not into him. She like expressly said that like she only did that to get with Child. And Lucia, the other two, they were.
She's based on Lucrezia Borgia, if you want to know historical
cool
parallels, who is definitely not 12th century as well, which is another weird thing, because like the troubadour stuff was all 12th century, but yeah, Lucrezia Borgia, and like all the marriages and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Taylor's on board with you. Kate, thoughts? Blaze and the ladies?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree. I mean, I tend to like the knight errant type characters, so I liked Blaze, and I liked seeing his arc from beginning to end. But I will definitely agree that I could have done with fewer women being all about him. So it started to feel a little unnecessary. Like I didn't. There are certain ones that felt like there was a point to it, and certain ones that felt like it was just another woman who had a crush on whatever with Blaze, and it just was like, another one, really? But
yeah, I feel like I never, when I first read this, like I remember rooting for Blaze and Liso like hard when I was like a child reading this. And then when Ariane happened, I was like, what? What's happening? Who's this girl? But even him, like, even on this read, when she shows up in his room, I'm like, what? Really? Like, I still don't really see that one, to be honest.
It's like a drunk dial.
I don't see Blaze with it. Exactly. Yeah. It's like they have like a, hey, you're here, you know, it's midsummer sort of thing. And from there, it the way that the final scene, which I haven't reread yet, but the way that I can't even say it because it's kind of spoilery. The way that it goes makes you feel certain feelings, and I don't feel those things. I think I'm supposed to feel more for the way that goes than I do.
I do think his characters are just overall weaker in this than his other stuff. I just really feel like they're a lot more surface level because there's so much more time spent on the plot, because we're so like, we have to get from point A to point B. And that is like, there's very tightly plotted. And I just think that like, I would have loved to see more of Signy and the Queen, and more of Ariane, and more of the what's her name, the priestess, Beatrix. Yeah, I would have loved to see more of some of those characters, and less of Blaze.
Agreed.
I think that's also something that like in his other stuff we see maybe more characters getting time, whereas in this, like, we're very focused on Blaze. And I just
I think Blaze is the most like, he's the main character of all the books.
Yeah. Whereas like other books, people are like, who's the main character? And it's like, there's no main character. It's a theme.
Yeah. Did you have like a favorite POV? We'll go around.
I like Rissala when she's the focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a hard time picking. I guess I would say Liso, just because I really like the troubadour culture and getting to see more of that, and I like how feisty she is. So, like, I really enjoyed her sections. But I also really liked Rosella's. I really liked Senia's. I don't know. I liked a ton of the POVs. I do wish we'd gotten more time with some of them, but I loved them.
Yeah.
I kind of wish this had been Bertrand's story instead of Blaise. Like, I think Bertrand is a more interesting character than Blaise.
He's definitely a more intriguing character. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how the feud between Talaire and Mirabel, I'm eating candy, sorry, is so, it's a little bit off to the side. Like, it's not the main conflict. It's in the past, like 23 years in the past, which is so funny the way that the prologue happens. I liked seeing everyone react to that in the Discord. But even though the feud is like sort of off to the side, it's still like, it's so this like raw, oozing, festering wound that it impacts the political stuff that's happening and the fallout of everything even now, and especially with like how everything ends. Spoilery, right?
How everything ends. That's pretty vague. I mean, there's a lot of different places this book can end. If you've only read the first part, like, it could have gone in a couple of different directions.
I don't really have a favorite POV in this one. I do always like the, like, I think I like the random ones. I like when it's Luce's POV. And I like Roche, the priest guy that's just can't stop eating those fish, you know? Like, just like the really random ones that they don't necessarily not have a purpose, but they fill in the feeling of the world a little bit more. Like, I think I've said in past videos where like he uses not main characters, he uses those periphery characters as world building, as a way to flush out the world and the culture and the country and the way of living, just so that you get like a more clear sense without him saying, da 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 da, this is what this country is like. We see it through the eyes of various people. Ooh, favorite scenes, tavern scenes and the festival.
Do we want to go spoilers? Because we can talk about favorite scenes.
Is there anything, where did that go? Why can't I? Is there anything other non-spoilery things to say? Would you two, after you both, would you recommend starting here?
I think I would recommend this as a possible starting point, but with the caveat that anyone that I would tell to read this, that this is not what Guy Gavriel Kay's writing has evolved into, because I think that there is a big difference. And I still haven't read The Lions of Alrasan and Sailing to Sarantium. I need to read.
And those are good.
Yeah.
Books.
So those are the ones I have left to read of his. And I don't know that I'll ever read the Fionnavar tapestry or whatever it's called. Fionnavar. I can never pronounce it.
I love that, but I can definitively say don't read that.
Yeah. So, and I still need to read Tigana. I haven't read Tigana either. So I think I have 5 books of Guy Gavriel Kay's left that I need to read. So it's hard for me to for sure say like this is.
Wait, have you read Under Heaven and River of Stars?
Oh no, I always forget about those. I actually have zero interest in them. I don't particularly like the whole like that it's an Asian setting with an author who has no connection to that heritage, writing in that historical way. I just feel kind of weird about that. So and I feel like I would have to do some more research and read some like reviews from people who
Own
are
Voices
themselves
reviews.
of that culture because I don't
Yeah.
know if he did it justice or not, or like, that just makes me feel a little bit weird. So those two, I just kind of don't even think about. Though it's funny because when I got my book signed, it was at the release for Under Heaven. That was the release that it was that I went to when I got my copy of Last Light of the Sun signed. So
Yeah. I think I would say like this is good, very like representative of his prose, but not necessarily the style that it still is.
yeah, I think I would just be worried that people would be disappointed if they were plot readers. Like, I don't think plot readers typically should read Guy Gavriel Kay. Like, if that's like what
Totally
you want
agreed.
in a book, like, which is funny because like I love plot.
And
I'm
you are
very
a plot
much
reader, yeah.
a plot reader, but I think because his themes and his world building are so good, that draws me in, and like the crafting of a world is something that I can really get behind. But yeah, if you like plot, like, these are probably not for you. If you like simple, easy to understand prose, this is not for you. Like,
who would you recommend this to, Kate?
I don't know. I definitely would. I agree on not recommending it to plot-driven readers. I think I would probably. I mean, like I made the Tolkien comparison before, but I think if you like that kind of
Classic.
really in-depth world-building type fantasy, the older style, you would probably really get into this. And I'd probably recommend it to like historical fiction fans who want to like get into fantasy, because I think this straddles that line really well. So that's probably how I would frame it. Just after one book.
I think like I would tell, and I think actually seeing like in the Discord, like people at the end of being like their overall thoughts and like where they wound up, like star rating wise and stuff like that. And some people just like, yeah, you know what? Not for me. This was a 3.5. It's like, I'm not like upset or hurt or offended or anything like that. Although like when my book club was tearing apart A Brightness long ago, like I did spend the whole time defending him and like pitching all of the other books. But I think that like he's very much a reader. It's like it's going to click with you or it's not. And that's actually usually why I don't recommend Tigana, because I feel like Tigana is like a little bit more like him doing stuff that's really different. Whereas this one, it's like, you know what? There's like a kind of a plot. So like it's a tight plot. He doesn't meander, so you can get a sense of like, am I into the writing? Do I like his, you know, kind of formal dialogue and old fashioned kind of style of like meandering? I don't remember where I was going with that. What was I saying?
Who you would recommend it to?
Who I'd recommend it to. But yeah, so it's like I think I definitely like people who read for theme. And like I don't read for theme. I'm a heavy character driven reader, but I think where Kay gets me is the beautiful moments. Like if you're someone who who like really feels when things happen in books and like loves those, or like will reread like a scene or a passage because of like the way that it feels and like everything piecing together, like that is Kay. That is where these books shine for me, is that he has this like amazing ability to create the most beautiful, like quiet moments that hit. Like the mic drop moment in the tavern. There's like so many things that I'm trying to think of other ones in this book. Like these just like quiet clicking moments, often at night with like two people chatting up. I know that's why like a bunch of people in the Discord didn't like Autumn season, because like there wasn't enough like dialogue. Or like Bertrand and Blaze at the top of the stairs. Like those moments. And on top of that, the beautiful writing. Like if you live for like beautiful moments in books, you have to read a Kay book at least once, because there's always going to be a handful of those moments where you're like, oh my God, this is beautiful.
And I think he's gotten a lot better at those moments, because, and I can't help but compare A Song for Arbonne to A Brightness Long Ago, because I read A Brightness Long Ago like 3 months ago, and I think in A Song for Arbonne, some of those moments feel a little manufactured because of the tight plotting in my mind. Because you
It's too
have to
quick.
have those moments. Whereas in some of his other stuff where the plot is more meandering, which normally I hate, but I just love the way Guy Gavriel Kay can do it, where he's just like, you have no idea where he's going with this. Like A Brightness Long Ago starts with an assassination and like two people fleeing an assassination, one who is the assassin and the other who worked for the person who was assassinated, and they're like helping each other escape, and it's just like this like
That's
pell-mell
the
like
best start
what
to that a book.
like that. I love that. And like then
Yeah.
they go their separate ways, and then you're like, wait, this book isn't about these people? like it's such a
But
such a
it
like
is. Those are
it
like the
is,
main characters.
but it's not about them.
Yeah.
It's about the two feuding
Yeah.
lords who have armies who are clashing, and how these two people exist on the periphery of those two very powerful men. So it like, I think that the moments in A Brightness Long Ago just were more like, I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Whereas like the scene at the top of the stairs with Blaise and Bertrand, like I knew that was coming. I knew exactly what was going to happen in that moment. I did not think that it was a surprise at all, especially given how Arbonne has been positioned as this land where like women make choices for themselves. So like it did not surprise me at all. I hope that's spoiler free enough.
But even if it doesn't surprise you, it's still like, I don't mean that part. I mean their discussion afterwards. Isn't that not like the most beautiful quiet? Like, I think I texted Taylor when I was reading that this time around. Taylor, if you remember, let me know. But I think I was just being like, I got to this part and I was like, oh my God, I love this book so much.
I just don't have the same emotional connection to this book that you do, Kristen. I just didn't feel it as much. I didn't feel, and like the first time I read it, like I didn't think about it again. To be honest, Last Light of the Sun got stuck in my head, and for like a year, I told everybody it was the best book and they had to read it. And like A Song for Arbonne, I was like, yeah, okay, it's good. I read it. Yeah, okay, moving on, kind of thing.
That's so funny. This is just because when I saw Maria's comment that she was comparing it to Grace of Kings. I was like, oh my gosh, Taylor just told me this like 2 days ago that she thought it was similar.
That gives me more hope for Grace of Kings, so.
Yeah, me too, actually.
We need to do just a GGK appreciation stream where we just gush about GGK books.
Jake. You have to do a live stream. It's just like a GGK appreciation chat. Please let Sarah and I know. Sarah, you have to read all the other books before this happens.
Yeah, I think I'm going to read all of them. As many as you can. That is my plan. I'm gonna probably do a series because I'm gonna review the books that I read, like A Brightness Long Ago, Children of Earth and Sky, and All the Seas of the World. And I was like, I should just read all of his books and do a review for everyone and make it like a series, like becoming a GGK completionist. Except I don't want to read Under Heaven or the other one, but so I won't be a full completionist.
What Jake did. Like, I feel like that's what Jake did. I've been like watching Jake like discover and appreciate each book a month, sort of over the last year and a bit, however long he was doing that. Okay, that's it for non-spoilers. Let's get into some. Okay, well, if you have not finished the book yet, or you don't want to hear like what you don't want to be spoiled for the ending or certain events, or who Blaise lines up with, the big question of the night. Just kidding. No, if you don't want to hear any spoilers for the rest of the book, thank you for joining so far. And come back, let us know when you are done the book. I would love to hear what you think. So we will go from here into spoilers. What do we want to start with? Kate, first time reader. Things that made you gasp or that caught you off guard, or like how did you feel about the ending? Like I feel like I need to hear like your first reaction to like spoilery stuff.
It's gonna be a little bit hard because I read this kind of like in one chunk, like basically this weekend. So a lot of it is kind of all like blended together. But one of the final things that happens with Urte definitely took me by surprise, and it's like that hit absolutely one of my favorite tropes of all time.
His reveal or the cavalry thing?
The
cavalry. Here comes
the cavalry.
Here comes the cavalry.
I am such a sucker for Here Comes the Cavalry, and it happened, I think, twice in this book. I'm trying to think of what the other one was where it happened.
When Falstus of Eric shows up at Degosink when they're doing the
the castle where they're like, oh shit, soldiers, and then the soldiers are like, hey, we're actually here to support you.
Hey,
I was convinced.
Did we hear correctly that Blaze Degosink is here?
So yeah, I loved those. I'm trying to think if I wasn't surprised by some of the other things, like the moment with Bertrand didn't really surprise me. I'm trying to think.
A lot of people guessed some stuff there in the Discord,
like
which I love.
The ending with Bertrand, the stuff with Bertrand?
Like the historical reveal?
The twin thing surprised me. I did not expect that. I'm less fond of that one, to be perfectly honest. I don't necessarily love the like, oh, there's another child type thing. So that for me was kind of like, okay, sure. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't see it coming, but I didn't love that one as much. Yeah, I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
I think even on reread. Oh, let's go to the comments.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I saw you guess. You guessed a bunch of things here. So I think didn't you say too that you wanted Bertrand to wind up with Rosala or Razala? Somebody said that, and I was like, what? How did they get there?
Yeah, that one surprised me, but I was stoked about that one. I did like that.
I was just gonna say, even on reread, I felt a holy shit moment when you first go to Gorhout and you see the way that the king is acting. And I was listening to this and I was like, wait, what? I did a double take. I was like, he's just got a lady under the table there for him in front of everybody. I was like, what is this? I had totally forgotten about that. And on the reread, I was like, oh yeah, GGK is really showing us the difference in the way that women are treated in Arbonne versus Gorhout. Like, he's really laying it on thick there, so we understand that these are different ways of treating women.
Yeah, I actually thought that it was a little bit heavy-handed. Like, it's not that this, like, I love this book. I know that it has flaws. And that is one, I think, whereas, like, this is one of the more black and white kind of a conflict. Yeah. Where usually he does a really good job of, like, showing you the pros and cons of each side, or, like, the conflict in a well-rounded way. And this one is very much so, like, baddies versus good guys. Even there was like so many things, there were so many comments where it's like, oh, well, if we react this way, we become what we're trying to defeat. And they didn't say defeat because that's like obviously taking down a Dark Lord. But basically up until the word defeat is what they said. And it happened like multiple times where they phrased it that way.
Yep.
I'm just like, we get it. But then you always hear Blaze talking about like how much he loves Gorhout and how, you know, what he sees for the country. And I'm just like, what is it about? Like, I don't think that he actually did a really good job of selling us on Blaze's view of that, because really what it's like, is it just going to completely become a different culture? Because like nobody had problems burning all these ladies.
Yeah. He's totally going to wipe out misogyny. He's one man. Woohoo!
Yes. Or in the final battle, he's like, thinking about like the Degarsink Korans are like sort of this one they're like switching, and he's like, you know, are there he couldn't really possibly believe that Garsink Korans, who he had like grown up with and trained with and whatever, would be okay with doing all that other stuff. And it's like, didn't you say that your dad like burns a woman once a year, like just to keep, you know, that keep everyone on their toes? And that's like the Korans are obviously helping with that. They're doing it all the time. What are you talking about? So I think that that's like a fairly significant flaw in this book, is just like the pure evilness of Adamar and the dad, the high priest, Galbert.
the high priest just makes me think of in the Disney movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the priest in that who's like it's just total like cartoon villain, right? Like he just is so like not a real character. And I think that's part of what, like, when I'm talking about the characters just aren't as good in this as in his later stuff, I think that his characters are just so much more nuanced in later things. Because like even Adamar is like a caricature, right? He's the evil king. He's the dumb evil king who's being manipulated. Like he doesn't really have a personality. And I think it's unfortunate because I think there were some places where you could have seen that come through a little bit, especially in the kind of battle scene and the duel and that kind of stuff. Like you could have had a little bit more exploration of like why Adamar is doing this, other than the fact that he's just naive, stupid. Like
he just really wants to bang Razala.
Oh my god.
But I mean, all the stuff he did before
know?
that, right? Like he was manipulated into trading away half of his country.
Yeah.
Like because he's dumb.
For what?
Like that was kind of the thing where it's like that is not as good. But yeah, Blaze's brother fighting the king was so good.
Oh,
I
it was
did
so
like that.
good.
Yeah. Any great moments? Like best moments, favorite moments, whether they were big or small.
I love the at the fair where they're doing the trial on the river with the boats.
Yes.
That's like my favorite. I can visualize that so beautifully.
I was just
like,
going to say, I can picture it perfectly. Yes. I had the exact same thought. Like, I want to see this happen.
That's actually one of the only scenes that I remembered very strongly. That and the, like, from like first reading, when I was rereading, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to come up kind of thing. And then I also really remembered them rowing out to go and pick up the bard or the troubadour.
Evrard.
Yeah.
That part was great. There's more humor than I expected in this. I will definitely say that. Like very dry humor, but it was great. I was very pleased with that.
Yes, Mercy. This is one of my favorite scenes, like, I don't want to say of all time because it's not quite right, but it's a scene that like lives very distinctly in my head of like the like mic drop moment of Ramir like playing this song and then walking out and being like, oh, I guess I did play a love song, and you're just like, yes. I love it. This is the first time that I always start crying in the book. I've got a few. This is also a favorite. I love Luth. I love Luth POVs every time, especially at the beginning when he was like, nobody's remembering that I helped them like catch all those sheep or goats or whatever in that storm that one time. And he's like, I'm just, very religious. And oh my God, like I love, and the fact that he like kind of saves it. Like he's the hero of the book. And I always think so. Like I feel like that's the case anyways. That like he's the hero who kind of saves the day, who turns the tide. I love it. I love Luth's arc.
But it's not his decision to turn the tides, which I think is interesting, right?
Yes.
Like he's directed.
Yes.
Okay, can we come back to that? We have to come back to that because somebody commented something about a woman-man thing in the Discord, and I was like, but she is anyway. Okay, so yeah, we have to come back to that. I'm trying to think of moments that make you cry or other favorite moments. Like I like the boat scene you talked about. I don't know. Moments that make you cry though.
I didn't cry in this book either time that I read it.
The scene with Blaze's brother fighting the king, and I actually really liked that his trick with the king worked, and that he would have gotten it. And I liked that it worked because Adamar never played those games, so like it makes perfect sense that he wouldn't catch on to something like that. So I love that, and I think I cried more there than I did anywhere else. I cried when Valeri died because I loved him.
Oh, yep. Like the fake out.
Not remembering.
That's early.
Yeah.
When Valerie takes the first arrow. And they think it's poison.
The poisoned arrow.
During the water boat thing. During the boat thing.
Yeah. I was really sad.
I just was not remembering the name. I'm like, who's that? Yes. The other Koran. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm really bad at names.
Cousin or whatever.
Yeah.
The cousin.
Yeah.
Okay, I start
What was-
crying with Aurelian. What were we gonna say?
No, go ahead. My thought is not about crying,
Sure.
so I'll save it. I'll save
Oh,
it.
okay. Okay. I start crying with Aurelian. Then I cry when Ranald and Rosala are like talking about the name thing. Oh my god. What was the other part? Oh, it just happened too. I don't know. Basically, the majority of the rest of the book then.
I think I was with the people in the comments that like the first half of this book I liked better than the second half. I think there was just more character
I
stuff
think there
in the
was a
first half
shift.
that I liked.
I think there is a shift. I think like the way that they're setting up and leading you and like meeting all of the people and everyone, like the way that all of those interactions are happening, I think is better than the rollout. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I liked a lot of the moments in the first half, but because I love battle scenes, like just deep rooted, that winter, I would say that autumn I was the most mixed on. I still really liked it, but I think it was not as strong as the others.
Mixed on
winter, man, I loved that final battle scene was everything I wanted it to be, and I don't think that I've seen that many people write battle that well when they have a descriptive writing style. So
It is autumn. See, I listened to the audio and it doesn't tell you the different books. Like it just goes right through.
Autumn is the fair.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rosala comes to Arbonne.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think autumn maybe starts with her being confronted by the high priest. Let me double check that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought, I mean, like, an autumn is the longest chunk. I just think autumn is very like chaptery. Because in each chapter, no, third is my favorite. Ooh. Would that be like autumn then? If that's like kind of like midsummer / autumn. That's interesting. I think autumn is really like chaptery because it's like they're doing specific things. So there's like the Rosala thing of her like leaving and all of that, and then there's like what else happens then there's the tavern scene with Ramir and the mic drop, like you get those, and there's another scene where it's like they're at the with like Bertrand and the king of Valencia, like there's that moment, and then they go back in, and then there's like the whole chapter of Blaze being like assaulted or like whatever, like held, and that whole thing, like it's like very, very chunky.
Well, the thing with the roses, that's in autumn as well, right?
I think so.
Where he wins
and then there's
the roses,
the duel,
and he like declares.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff.
And then also there's the also when they attack Aubrey, the border town, and they.
Oh, right.
So it's like so much stuff happens in like a span of 3 days at the autumn fair. So it's like it's not as smooth. It is very like distinct, and it's like stuff is happening.
Yeah, I think I like the first chapters of this book the best, like where we don't know who Blaze is necessarily, and like we're just seeing him, and like you kind of have that sense of like, oh, who is he? Like I think once it was revealed, I was just like, of course you're gonna become king. Like, of course that's how this is gonna work out. It just, I don't know. Maybe it's because it was a reread, and like I read this.
I was gonna say, did you have those of course moments the first time?
I can't remember. I read this book for the first time. I was like 17.
Yeah.
And I'm like 35. Like it's been a long 14.
Time. Same. I was like 14 or 15, but I do remember not guessing any of the things, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I probably didn't guess as much. I also, like, at that age, reading, there's no way I was thinking about the themes. Like, I was just like, yeah, this is a good fantasy book. Like, yeah, you know, like there's fights and there's knights and there's, you know, all of this fun stuff. And like, now when I read it, I'm like, okay, yeah, you can see how the theme of women and power is a really important theme in this book. And it's in a lot of GGK's works, actually, which I think is really interesting, considering that, like, he's not a woman, you know, and the fact that like he's constantly looking at different ways that women have had power historically and how they can exert influence in different ways.
Exactly.
And like, so like those kinds of things I was definitely not thinking about when I was reading this at 17. But it did, like, the plot felt predictable. And I mean, at 35, I've read hundreds of fantasy books at this point now, right? Like, I think on my Goodreads I've read over 600 books, and the majority of those are fantasy. So like the plot itself did not feel original in any way. But this was also written in like 95, so there was a lot less you know, stuff out there.
On that, like, just really, like, just like a random throw in, it was 95? 92, okay.
92,
I was going to say, because Tigana's 90, so it just, like, shows you, like, this, the time spaces in between his publications show you how much research he does. Like, this, he's not publishing every year. He takes his time because he does so much research. I have like a one-off comment, and just that I like that there are moments where we are having Blaze, who is like our very clear main character in this book. I like that there are moments when he learns stuff that we never see through his POV, that we're getting it from someone else. We don't have that moment of discovery and that like initial thought process of like those like revelations sort of in his internal dialogue. So like there's the scene when he's talking to Rudel, his friend, in the courtyard after the shooting. And he's learning like that it was his dad, that Luciana's remarried, like all of those things that he's like hearing for the first time and has to like react to, but we're seeing it through Luzo's eyes. There's another one too that I can't think of where like something else really significant happens that he's learning about. Oh, when he meets his brother and dad again for the first time in Gorhot, when they do that raid.
Yeah, the Garsok Castle.
I think we're seeing that through like that random Koran's eyes, I think. The guy that went back and was like, So I like that there are those moments where you like think that you're going to get this reaction from Blaze and you don't, because otherwise everything that feels really like him grumbling about the women in Arbonne and about his dad and whatever.
So
you never get him reacting to things.
So on that topic of like discovering things in interesting ways and how brilliant GGK is with his world building. So a little bit of backstory on this. I don't know if either of you or anybody in the comments watches the channel A Critical Dragon. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's like an academic in the realm of fantasy. He's one of the editors or like first readers on the Malazan Book of the Fallen stuff. Anyhow, he did a video a while ago about like what is fantasy and how do we even define fantasy, and he talked about like portal fantasies. AP Canavan, Jake knows who I'm talking about. Thanks, Jake. And he did this, and he's been doing a series, I think, and in the second in the series of those videos he talked about like portal fantasies and how we don't necessarily have to think about portals as being like the wardrobe or something that's like a physical thing where you go from one place to another. And he gives an example of like the Enterprise in Star Trek, which like I don't really know a lot about Star Trek, but like the ship, I guess, being like a portal that transports the characters from one place to another. And so what's really interesting in this, and this is like a weird way to think about it, but I've been thinking about this a lot, is that like because Gorhot and Arbonne are so different, Blaze coming to Arbonne, it's like he's been transported to a different world. And we are seeing Arbonne through his eyes as a foreigner to Arbonne. So that gives GGK the opportunity to talk about things and explain things for the reader's sake, but it's also for the sake of Blaze, because Blaze wouldn't know because he's from Gorhot, and Gorhot is so different than Arbonne. And I just think that's brilliant the way that is done, because it allows info dumping to happen in an organic way. And like you can have an info dump, but it doesn't feel like an info dump because Blaze is like, what the hell is going on? Like, this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And like that I thought was really interesting. Yeah, AP Canavan on A Critical Dragon, his channel, he's got some interesting, like, if you want to dig into stuff like that, that's not just about like book reviews, it's an interesting channel.
Yeah. I also like that the views on the family are often coming from people outside, like where the Koran is talking of, or is commenting in that section on how kind of the poison that's built between the two brothers and the dad. And you also get it from Rosala's point of view too, at one point where she's talking about seeing them all fight each other. Like, because I don't think if you get it from Blaze, you don't have enough of an outside perspective to really see what's happening between the three of them without being tainted by it. So I like that he did it that way too.
Yeah. Well, and like from the historical perspective too, like we're getting the filling in the gaps of kind of what happened, where you're like, wait, whatever happened to Alis? And then suddenly we have a yes. POV with Cena being like reminiscing and like, oh, it's like a cold day and I want to cozy up with my husband. And like you learn like a little bit of like a historical jump sort of thing through her reminiscing. And the same, I think, with Beatrice and stuff like that. Beatrix, we get some fill. But I generally, that's what I meant about like the side periphery characters being used as world building. It's the same thing. It's like he never just like tells it, like spills a bunch of info about the world. It doesn't seem like he always finds a way to make it seem like you're learning it with someone else, or you're seeing it through someone's eyes rather than just exposition.
What is also really interesting about the way that he does that, where he gives us different characters' perspectives on things, you also then get to see sort of variations, like the way that Signe remembers Alis and the way that Ariane remembers Alis and the way that Urte remembers Alis and Bertrand, like they all have different, very different ways of remembering her. And so like at first,
even when like Beatrix being like kind of bitter about like, oh fucking,
well, and like I feel bad for Urte at the end when it's like revealed that like I loved her and she never loved me, and so that's where all this issue is. And it's like, wow, like that is a twist, right? Because in that moment you're like, oh shit, like yeah, like she was cheating on her husband with Bertrand in a very elaborate scheme, like the lengths that they went to get together, like that's like, how do we feel about that? I don't feel good about that.
But your original and your original placement of all of those events is like right in the prologue, where it's like so romantic and like built up, and she's like very clearly bitter about like not being in Barbentian, having been married away to this older man, and like who's probably, I think based on like the ages of that they are, like he's in his 60s and Bertrand's in like his 40s, like 20 years older than her. Like, and then all through the book, it's like this, like Bertrand's love, and he never moved on, and blah blah blah. And then you get this like reveal with Urte, and you're just like, this is devastating. Like, that's what I mean. It's like with the emotionality of Guy Gavriel Kay's writing with these like moments and reveals. It's just like he gets me every time.
And I love how that just furthers the deconstruction of the chivalric romance, like the idea of like these, so like the women get to have more of their own agency in his story than when you would look at like an actual 12th century anything that's written down, right? Like but at the same time, he's still writing within the historical context, which I think is where some readers who maybe aren't used to reading historical fantasy can feel a little bit ucky about some of the things that he does, because yes, like there are limits on what the women can do, but they have way more agency and way more of importance in the story than a lot of other pseudo-medieval fantasy, in my opinion.
Yes, and that's why it bothers me so much when people like say that GGK like doesn't write women well, or he's like whatever, and I'm just like, I have the strongest feeling against that. Like he takes historical times and he doesn't like make female soldiers, you know, in Italy. Sorry, like didn't happen in Renaissance. Like he's not totally like, and I like to see that in other fantasy. Love it. This is very clearly something else. And he shows you other ways that women were strong and powerful and how they were like players in the game, sort of thing. I will just say that Alis is not 16. She's 16 at the time of the marriage to Urte, but I don't remember the exact number of years. But by the time the thing with Bertrand happened, she has been married to Urte for a few years. I'm pretty sure. Like, she's at least 19 or 20. Like, not that that's like a world of a difference. Mentality.
Yeah, because Ariane is like 14 or whatever with her at that time, and there's a bigger age gap between her and Ariane.
Yeah, Ariane's like 13. Yeah.
But
well, it's okay, Mercy. This is a good point, and I almost think that I would suspect that Sarah would agree with you. Usually, if we weren't talking about a GTK book, Sarah would be like, yeah, so if it's not exactly this world, then you could change those rules.
I think if I can address this, because
I not exactly what you said, Sarah?
So
yes.
It's historical fantasy, but this isn't historical fantasy. I think that's the issue, right? When you're taking historical fantasy, by all means, change whatever you want. But I think calling this historical fantasy is a bit of a misnomer, because while he has changed, the things that are fantastical about it are that he's pulled in, like I said, Eleanor of Aquitaine and Lucrezia Borgia and the Cathars and troubadours, and all of these things exist in our real history, but maybe not all at the same time. But like the actual fantastical elements, the world that he has built is such a strong parallel to the real world that there are, I think, rules that he has set up by creating the world the way he has. So he hasn't followed, I mean, the women in this are by far more free to do things than women in actual 12th century France were. Like, do you think that Alis would not have suffered consequences if she did this to her husband in 12th century France? Like, if this was a real historical, yeah, she probably would have been killed by her husband long before she ever gave birth to a child. Like there are things like the way that Ariane and her husband, their relationship, and the fact that he's gay and that she is seeking extramarital affairs to fulfill her own desires,
and wears her hair down.
That's not going to be a thing in 12th century France. Like that's just, there's no historical precedent for that. So he has moved this forward and given these women more freedoms than what they would have had in an actual historical 12th century France setting. But I think for me, the thing that I love about GGK and the way he represents women is that so often in fantasy, women are treated, the idea of like strong woman has to be someone who is physically strong or able to wield a sword, or in some way just becomes a man with boobs, right? Like, and it doesn't acknowledge that there are different kinds of strengths, and that being a strong mother is being strong. Being a strong wife you can still be a strong woman who is a wife. Like, and Ariane is a strong woman who is a wife, and she is a partner. She defends her husband when Blaise, and this is, I know we're coming up on the homophobic comments thing.
Yeah. I was just waiting till I was going to let you do the get to the end of your spiel here.
She defends her husband, and she tells Blaise, like, you're acting like an idiot. Like, your homophobia is misplaced. Like, what do you even know about it? Like, she totally defends her husband in that situation, and I think she shows a lot of strength. I mean, the fact that as a 13-year-old she manages to watch her cousin die in childbirth and take the child and take it to somewhere safe and loving, and then at the end she makes the decision that, like, it's not her secret to tell, and she goes and talks to the girl, Renella, what's her name? I can't remember. And is like, hey, before I tell this secret, are you okay with it? Like, this is going to turn your whole life upside down. Like, those are all strong things about these women characters. And I think that that's where, like, the strength in women is in his characters. Like, in some of his other books, he has just incredible, like the healer that's in all of like the 3 most recent books. I can't remember what her name is, but she's just such an incredible example of a strong woman who is feminine. Like, being feminine doesn't make you weak. And I think that's something that, like, the whole courtly love thing is trying to prove in this book. It's trying to fight against misogyny. And I don't know, Kristen, if you want to start in on the homophobia stuff, or I can, because I also have been thinking about this quite deeply.
I don't think I have as many. I always just feel like it's part of you seeing the world through Blaze's eyes and being like it's part of his growth to realizing that he like is pretty biased and has been like brainwashed into thinking certain things. But I have like minimal thoughts. I think you have more to say than I do.
I do. I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I was watching in
I
the
have
Discord.
stuff to say on like the women stuff for sure, but
on the Discord I was watching, and I think that definitely some of the comments about so there's two things that are going on in this. We do have one gay character. There's one gay character, which is Ariane's husband.
Elaine, Lizzo, the troubadour that Lizzo works with?
Male gay character.
Elaine is Guy.
Elaine a guy? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot about Elaine.
No worries.
But are there a lot of insults thrown at Elaine? Because I actually don't remember those parts. Because I looked up all of the references. So all of the homophobic comments, starting with the Aramondan, who is the joke.
Blaze makes comments about the
Aramondans. And it isn't Blaze at first. The first comment is actually from one of the other Korans who make a comment, and I looked this up because I have the e-copy and I searched Aramondan and I read every single section in the book where it mentioned the Aramondans to try and find this because I was listening to this by audio. But basically the first time that this is thrown out, it is not Blaze actually, but Blaze obviously doesn't say anything against it. And the fact that the people from Gorhot are so misogynistic, this is a key characteristic of Gorhot, that they are misogynistic, man-focused, women are inferior. So in that culture, when we think about cultures, what is the biggest insult you can level at someone? Something that is going to emasculate a man is going to be the biggest insult. And calling someone not just gay in the book, they actually call the first guy, the Aramondan, and they call him a catamite, which is a very specific slur which comes from ancient Greece. Catamites were the young homosexual boys in relationships with older men. So pedophiles, so pedophilia, the term that we obviously now think is a terrible, horrible thing, in ancient Greece, that was very well accepted by cultures, and older men often had relationships with younger men, and the younger man was known boy, actually I shouldn't say man, boy, underage for what we would consider, and the boy would be called a catamite. But in the Middle Ages, calling someone a catamite was a grown man a catamite, and I looked this up because I wanted to make sure I understood it. Calling someone a catamite when they were a grown man was simultaneously questioning their masculinity and their adulthood. So saying you're not, so like it's a very specific slur, and it's homophobic. Like, this is clearly homophobic. Like, I'm not trying to say that it's not, but within the context of Gorhot and within the context of that culture, I think it makes perfect sense that these would be the kind of insults that get hurled between men in that culture, in that cultural atmosphere. And then what I think to me speaks volumes for how Guy Gavriel Kay is clearly not actually homophobic. He has characters defending Ariane's husband and his Ariane. There's a whole conversation. I think the first time that Ariane and Blaze get together, he's making comments about like he's not sure, he's not sure about this, and like, what about your husband, and like all this stuff. And she calls him out and she tells him that he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to gay men, and that like her husband is a great guy, and like all of this stuff. And so I think that really, to me, shows that it wasn't, it wasn't meant for Guy Gavriel Kay to be inserting his own views of homosexuality. And I do see, Mercy, you're commenting here. So yeah, so at the end, it didn't feel like Blaze was learning that he was wrong. I think the thing is that because this is a thematic exploration of women and women in power and misogyny, there wasn't room necessarily to also tackle the question of views on homosexuality, as well as the fact that this was written in 92. I was
going to say
in
that.
the
I was going to
90s.
say that actually.
Yeah,
I was going to bring up the
it
92
was written
thing.
in the 90s, and every
Yeah.
kid I knew was on the playground saying that's so gay, right? That was the
It
phrase
was
everybody
written in the
used.
90s.
It was written in the 90s. So I think that's also part of it. And I think that I can forgive a book for maybe not unpacking those kinds of things because, first of all, yeah, the book wasn't about that. Second of all, I think if GGK wrote this today, he would not include those comments. He wouldn't have felt they were necessary if he was writing this book today, is my opinion. Because in none of his recent stuff do you have, there are gay characters, there are lesbian
I was going to say
characters, there are
there's
bi
always,
characters. Like,
yeah,
I
in
think
his
there's
books.
even a transgender character in one of his books. I could be wrong on that, but so like he's definitely not an author who feels this way, but it was written in the 90s. It was not part of the thematic discussion. I think Blaze did start to question, like he definitely is questioning how he sees the world. And I'm not sure that he even got to the end and was like, yeah, like women are capable. Like I think he sees the errors of Gorhot's ways, but again, kind of like Kristen was saying at the beginning, we don't really know what his plan is for Gorhot. Like how is he going to change things? Like I don't think that was really taken to the extreme that it could have been. But the other thing that I just want to mention, and that this is something that drives me crazy, is that oftentimes people read really popular books that are written now that will have things in them that in my mind are questionable when it comes to their representation of LGBTQIA plus people, but those books, nobody ever talks about them. And so I think for me, being part of the LGBTQ community, it was seeing those comments in chat, it was really weird for me to like be like, but this doesn't bother me, but Piranesi did, where you have a villain whose like defining characteristic is that he is gay, and at one point the narrator says he smells of fecal matter. If you want to make fun of a homosexual person, what are you going to say to them? Like commenting that they smell like fecal matter? Like that's about as homophobic as you can get. And nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about that. And in the reviews of Piranesi, nobody batted an eye. And so so I think that's Mercy. If I'm getting, over worked up about this, it's not you, it's me. This is a me thing. As someone who is queer, it just this particular portrayal did not bother me. I thought it made sense, even if it wasn't dealt with or unpacked in a way that we would maybe do it now.
It's so interesting because I always feel like I put Kay in like someone who was a little bit progressive for their time, in that they were writing a book in 92 where there was a conversation about that with like specifically the one with Ariane and Blaze, her being like, you know what you're talking about. Like, first off, I was like sold to this guy, so like I'm gonna do whatever I want. But like, secondly, like the fact that she's like defending her partner and calling Blaze out on his ignorance, I always thought that was a little bit advanced. I don't ever feel like, I haven't read all of them recently, but I do feel like there's always inclusion of LGBTQ characters in his books, and it's always in a very matter of fact way of being like, yes, of course there were gay people at this time. Like this has always been the way that like people are. Like this is something that's been around forever, and in various times it was lesser, more accepted, or whatever. Like it didn't change. What's the right word? Like that they always married a man and a woman, a king and a queen, prince, princess, whatever. Like that was a thing because blood lineage was important to them at that time, right? And like things like that. And I love that modern fantasy finds ways to change that, but I always thought that it was really, I guess, progressive or like interesting that Kay has always written homosexual characters in his books and various LGBTQ in like the historical context, because it was like the reality. Hey, Taylor.
I don't understand the last comment here, but the people in the chat.
Just that there were other
comments.
Yeah. Just that there.
I don't know which those books are.
Mercy, feel free to clarify if you're talking about like what Sarah was saying about Piranesi or Kay's books. Anyway, one last thing, and then I promised my partner I would like stop it at 10 for me. But did we get into all of like the women's strength stuff? We didn't talk about the saving the day, the real hero.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
I like to say, Lou. Okay, so someone, I think it might have been Mercy, but it might have been someone else. So someone commented in the book that there was a section towards the end, or a comment towards the end, where somebody, and I thought when I was reading Discord it said scene, but I think it was Beatrix. From when I was reading it, I was like, oh, Beatrix just said something about that, where they felt like they had reached the point in the conflict where everything had to be handed off to the men, from like a military point of, or like time period or perspective. And yet it's Beatrix and her, mystical, what's the goddess's name?
Rianne,
yeah.
Rianne powers that tells them where the final battle is going to be, and then plus all of the business with Luth and the arrow and all of that. And it's like, here, Mercy's clarified.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mercy. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like in her head, she feels like she is like she can't contribute anymore because she doesn't wield a sword or whatever, but she does. And all of the women do in various ways. Like they contribute in other ways that aren't necessarily soldiering.
Yeah. Also, Signy and Urte making the plan for Urte to pretend to, like, and Urte claims that, like, oh, I went to Signy and I told her to do this or whatever, but like Signy could have been like, no, you idiot, like you're just gonna, but she sees that like, oh yeah, that actually could give us a strategic advantage, and she is ultimately in charge. Like Signy is the one who makes the decision to put Bertrand in charge and like all that stuff. So I think that like clearly we have women in very important roles here, and like the arrow at the end, like with like Beatrice, like that's, even though she's not the one who pulls the bow string, like she set that in motion, like that is her work. And so I think absolutely like trying to say that like, oh, the men saved the day at the end, like no, like even though Blaise is the main character of this book is not about Blaise, it's about Arbonne, and it's a song for Arbonne and for the way that Arbonne thinks about things, and this way of looking at women in a different way, like the women getting, and this brings me to the thing about why Liso is so important at the end. So troubadour culture, Liso becomes the first woman troubadouresse, which is the feminine of troubadour. And so she takes the inspiration and she starts to write her own music, and that I think is really part of where we see like Arbonne is continuing to grow and expand what women can do, right? Like as we see throughout the book, like even with Signy being alone on the throne, right? Like up until right before the book, there was a king. Like it wasn't always Signy. Like this is really like
it's Count and Countess Sarah. But
well, okay, whatever. Count and Countess. Yes. She's acting like the queen. The head of state. So
yes, there you go.
I think like that really like speaks to the growth of Arbonne, right? Like because as far as we know from the book, it never talks about there ever being a countess alone on the throne, as it were, right? Like there's usually a count to go along with it, and up until her husband died, that's how it was. And so like I really like how the roles of women are explored in this book, and I really like when you think about chivalric romance and the way that like medieval literature and even and the songs of troubadours, like what they were like, women were not treated like this. He has really taken that idea of like the courtly love and turned it on its head to mean both women and men having a say. And I mean, we don't have other genders in this, but I would like to think that GGK would include other genders as well, but having a say in their own paths when it comes to how they live their lives, and not just, even if they have to be forced into, a marriage, that they still have control to be able to, pursue their own interests the way like Ariane does, and the way that, I mean, for better or ill, the way Aeolus does, right? That like and that it's okay that they wanted to pursue, you know, their own things.
Yeah.
Though Alis probably could have done it a little more subtly.
Yeah.
She just sounds like a mean person. Like when Urte at the end, like I felt so bad for Urte. I was like, she just sounded like a brat. Like, I hate you, man. I slept with someone else and I'm gonna have their baby. Ha ha ha. And it's like,
Yeah.
why? Why? Like I'm
Because
sure he
she
knew
was
that. Like
taken
I'm sure
away
he
from the glittery, bright lights of Barbarian.
Yeah, but I think you also have to keep in mind that he's not really communicating that he cares about her. He's saying that at the end. But
Yeah,
if he could have communicated better to her that he did care about her in a way that would have made her maybe feel less bitter and less isolated. So,
Well,
I mean, I don't think her actions are right, but I don't think he's entirely blameless.
no. No, I don't think so
also,
either.
I mean, no, yeah, like he's not blameless, but like, and there's that she was, like, she had no choice in this marriage, right? She was a prize given to this duke to keep him a little bit closer to the count, right? And that's what she feels bitter about.
Yep.
And so she's making her own choices. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like it doesn't have as many female POVs, or at least the female POVs that it does are not as prevalent. Like they don't get quite as much page time, headspace as Blaze does. And that's unfortunate. But that being said, I feel like this is the book that I always want people to read when people say, oh, I tried reading a GGK book, but he was like, it was really male gazy, or like, I didn't like the way that he, like,
I don't understand those comments. Like,
no, I don't know, because I want people to read this book when they say that they tried out and didn't, or that they had heard, or like I'll even hear some male reviewers reviewing a GGK book and then be like, prefaced by the fact that like I've heard from a lot of my female friends that he doesn't write women well, and it's like they feel the need to like had like asterisk that disclaimer in, and it's like, well, if you that aggravates me, because I just feel like this is the prime example of why that's not the case, but it's not the case in all of the books. Does he talk about the female body a lot? Sure. I'm okay with that.
I think too, like it comes. You're okay. You're just a little laggy. You're a little bit behind. It's okay. No, I think that comes back to the fact that like we've been fed this idea of like what it means to be a strong woman for so long, and like we lose so much of like what that means and like what is femininity, and how, like, don't get me wrong, there are toxic levels of femininity that are bad, just like there's toxic masculinity, but there's also very good positive things about being feminine. And I know this sounds weird coming from me, someone who, you know, I am not feminine. That is not who I am at all. But I need to embrace the fact, and I think others need to too, that like there are so many different ways to be a strong woman and what that looks like. And I think that, yeah, we don't have any women warriors in this book. Like we don't have any women wielding swords. We don't have anyone riding out on horseback, and you know, we don't have women who are tacticians, or, you know, like all of those kinds of things. But that's not the only kind of strength that there is in femininity or in womanhood. And like, just like we also often don't get to see the more softer side of masculinity, which also is strength, right? Like there are different ways of being masculine as well. And like that's something that I don't think I've seen necessarily in any of GGK's books, where we've looked. There are moments where we get to see.
What do you see as, what would be an example of that?
So where like vulnerability, male vulnerability. And we do have moments, but I still think like in this book, for example, we get close to it with the scene on the stairs between Blaze and Bertrand, where Bertrand is like, you know, he's kind of being like, sorry, you know, I know your morals, we've gone against your morals because you don't believe I should be sleeping with a married woman, but, you know, here's, you know, he's trying to share a little
shows
bit of himself,
Yeah.
but it's not enough. It's not as much. And I do think there are some moments in some of his other books, but they aren't as prevalent as the ways that he's really good at showing women be strong in different ways. So I think a lot of the male characters in his works are very much those like soldiery types.
Well, he does a lot of artists.
That's true, actually, and they're always my least favorite characters. That's why I really didn't like Children of Earth and Sky. Like the artist in that, like no thank you. The politician in that, no thank you. That goes
the main character in the Serenity Mosaic is a mosaicist.
Okay, so I haven't read
like
that
very gruff and grief stricken. He actually reminds me a lot of Blaze. Blaze and Crispin are like very close in my head, but actually very different. I just picture them as the same person.
Even the artist though that goes to in Children of Earth and Sky, who goes to Serantium, which isn't called Serantium anymore. I can't remember what it's renamed. I don't know, he's just very young. And I think because of that, like his naivete and his youngness, I didn't really resonate with that at all. And I didn't really like that book at all. I didn't like Danica at all, the female pirate. I just felt she was a little bit too much.
I know, I didn't like Danica either.
The rah-rah women can be strong by fighting the men kind of thing, but
yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up here and I go to bed? I'm glad you read it. Would you read it again?
I would read it again. Maybe in another 10 years.
Would read that again.
In another 10 years.
It's actually been longer than 10 years since I read it the first time. But yeah, I feel like I need to reread Last Light of the Sun now, because I feel like I felt very similar about this book this time as I did last time. Like, I don't think my opinions really changed that much. I actually think I might have liked it slightly more this time because I was thinking about the themes a lot more. Whereas like last time when I was like 17, I just was like, yeah, it's a good fantasy book. Okay, not much magic. I could use, where are the dragons? But
yeah.
Well, you'll have to let me know.
Like I want to read
more. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think this definitely made me realize that I really like Kay's writing, and I don't have to be intimidated by thinking he's too literary or whatever for me. So I definitely will be just going on a binge read for a while.
Yay! Yeah, I mean, like, it is literary-ish, right? Like, he's quite, I would say even more so in other books, like he does kind of philosophize a little bit, and he's got like really long, flowery sentences where he's telling you about like life and the way things are and whatever. But like, it's so beautiful sometimes. He just like gets stuff so right. And I certainly would be the first to say that I don't understand everything. Like I'm someone who's like, I'm not piecing all of this together, but I can appreciate the, distant view of how I'm taking things in.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say
I was like
Kate
analyzing.
Oh yeah, I do that with all my books though. I can't help it. It's like my brain just works that way. So like when I read something, I need to understand it in a different way than a lot of people, unless I'm reading it just to read it. And like some books I just read and I'm like whatever. But then if I'm gonna like discuss a book, if I'm gonna review a book, I feel like I need to really dig into it. And like, I mean, we all have Google now, so there's lots of fun stuff you can find. But I was gonna say, Kate, my advice, if you are going to binge Guy Gavriel Kay, like I don't think you can. Like his stuff.
No, I mean more like one a month.
One a month. Yeah, I think that's about right. Because I had plans to read At Brightness Long Ago, Children of Earth and Sky, and All the Seas of the World all in 1 month. And that did not happen. So I read At Brightness Long Ago in the first month, and then I read Children of Earth and Sky, and then I read All the Seas of the World. So you got to let them breathe a little.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say it's kind of the kind of books that you need to like sit with.
Though I will say I read The Last Light of the Sun over a weekend at the cabin. So I definitely read it all like straight through. So I'll be really curious to reread it, because it was on, like, I've never talked about it on my YouTube channel because I feel weird about like talking about books as my favorite if I haven't read them recently, and that is definitely a book that I read a long time ago. But like, if I were to mentally make a list of like the most impactful books, like books that I still think about, like that is on that list. But I need to reread it.
Well, I'm excited for that, because I actually read that one, what feels like very recently, but in fact was actually last December. I'm very curious to see what you think. And Kate, you have to let me know where you go next, what you pick up next.
I'll definitely
I'm excited.
Thank you for the introduction to Kay, because this was fun.
You are so welcome. I hope that for everyone watching, you know, I think it was pretty mixed on the Discord. Like, there were a lot of people who I think liked it, and I think there were a lot of people who were like, yeah, this was a 3, not for me, but like everyone was like, but the prose was so beautiful. And it is. But I'm glad that everyone read it and that enjoyed it to some extent. You know, it's not a perfect book, but it's, I think, a really beautiful and lovely book, even though it has its flaws. And I think that Kay is something that you should at least try out. It's definitely not going to be for everyone, but I hope this was a good, like, you know, first Kay for those of you whose first GGK book it was. I think we'll call it here. It's kind of late on my end.
Can we just can we plug the September book for the book checkout?
Of course.
Because
That's a great idea.
Of course, we did the discussion on the book checkout book club Discord. So technically, August for Arbonne was Kristen's baby, if you will, but we are reading our first official book club pick in September. It is Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliot. So we are going to be doing a live show mid-October for that one as well. And very different vibes than this, though Kate Elliot, also very beautiful writing style. Everything I've ever read from her, I think, has a very nice kind of like descriptive writing style. I don't know that I would say it's exactly the same as GGK, but definitely, you know, sort of similar vein. But we are reading a sci-fi book by her, so that'll be different as well. So yeah, join us for that.
And I'm pretty sure that I put that and linked it in the Discord in the description box. And if I haven't, then I will do that. I will edit it in, but I'm pretty sure it's already there, so you can check that out. Well, thank you everyone for joining and for watching on the replay. I hope you guys have a great night. I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys. Thanks, Sarah and Kate.